Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Leah from Effortless Excellence Creations. No, content, that is.
Yes.
Effortless Excellence Content.
Yes.
Just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your business, and then we'll dive deeper as we go.
Sure. Hi, Jake. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm so glad you asked me to be on your podcast. So I own Effortless Excellence Content, and I always like to talk about my business in like with the um, with the advice for listeners that it's never a linear process.
Mm,
And so I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where there's a straight arrow going up and to the right, and underneath it it says what most people think business ownership is like. And then the next frame, it's this arrow with all kinds of squiggles,
hmm
and then the arrow kind of goes up and straight again. It's like this is what it actually looks like. And so that's been very much my experience as a business owner. I've been a serial business owner. I've always been involved in some kind of a side gig, even when I've been an employee of another company. And so like that streak in myself has always kind of run pretty wide and deep. So my business journey began when I opened up a yoga studio a number of years ago in 2014 and ran that in my little suburb for about 5 years from 2014 to 2019. I decided to sell the studio after an entire career in the fitness and wellness and industry as a direct service provider. So class teacher, personal trainer, team leader, that kind of thing, as an employee and then as the studio owner. Um, yeah, so after I sold in 2019, it was great timing. Nobody really knew that the pandemic was going to come in 2020, but it did a year later. And unfortunately, a lot of small boutique fitness studios were not able to stand that financial and social stress that the pandemic delivered. And so I was glad that I got out when I did. And then the birth of this company that I now own and run was pretty much directly tied to the pandemic. I had in that year interim between when I sold the studio and when I launched Effortless Excellence, I'd kind of been floating around and I had taken some business coaching courses, and I had intended to become a business coach and was just starting to build some clientele and had successfully completed a certification when all these businesses started shutting down because of the shelter in place and the pandemic, evolving and overtaking all of us. And what happened in that time is I had been writing some content for as a copywriter for a small local digital advertising agency. And so I was just learning how to pivot my writing skills into the marketing world as a blog post writer for some of those clients within that company. And it so happened that a studio owner acquaintance that I knew was looking for a copywriter right around the end of 2019 and 2020. And after a little conversation, she had hired me to as my first private client to handle just the email marketing and some of the social media posts in her for her studio, which was in California. And so I started doing that. And then she referred me to several other studio owners right as, shortly after the pandemic was beginning to take shape and people were starting to understand, like, what do we need to do to survive this really hard time
hmm
in
hmm
any business. And so this current business kind of found me as just a pathway forward through the pandemic, because all of my business coaching clients were then at a point of like, oh, what do we do now? Reevaluating their expenditures, their budgets, whether then was a good time to launch or not. And so I wasn't able to make a go of that particular revenue stream, but this other one just came in and it found me, and it happened to be something I was fairly gifted at. So yeah, I think a lot of times that's how our businesses and our new ideas find us, is if we're just willing to look at, well, what am I good at? What am I skilled at? And then we maybe dive into a little more education or experience in that area And we start off with that one client, and then if we do a good job, we get some referrals, and other people manage to find us. And so that essentially is my story. And 5 years later, I've been able to grow that business into a six-figure revenue stream and very much a self-sustaining business for myself. I hope that kind of
Yeah.
encapsulates the journey.
No, that's yeah, you did that's amazing. Hey, it's so cool to hear because so many business owners are similar, but there are different types of business owners where some are like, might be the serial entrepreneur, if you will, where it's like you kind of take whatever opportunity comes, you pivot, you adapt. I think every business owner has to adapt, but not everybody necessarily thinks that same way. So it's pretty cool to see how you kind of found your path to that and how it found you. From there, how did you like decide your initial product offering? How did you I guess what did you initially offer, and then what do you offer now? Has that changed over time?
Sure, yeah, great question. Starting out, I used a model that I still am currently using, even though I've grown in my offerings. So typically, what I focus on for my studio owner and other similar type of small business owners who are looking for regular support in their marketing content is I really love email marketing. So I'm typically sending out 1 to 2 emails a week in the voice of that client's brand. Many of my clients are Pilates studio owners or helping individuals, people like a hypnotherapist, for example, meditation teacher. I'm working with some travel agents and retreat specialists right now that just really benefit from that regular nurturing content put out as part of their brand, but that they may not have time to really make it shine and to craft the content that is going to speak to their ideal client and then gently invite them to continue down a sales journey or a funnel. And so that's what I love to specialize in with those regular recurring clients. And then I also offer copywriting services for websites. So when you're just initializing or you're refreshing your website copy, really making that a tool to pull in more sales and to make sure that you're calling out to the people that you want to serve, and that those people when they hit your website, they know like, oh, I'm in the right spot. She's talking to me or he's talking to me. I'm clear that this website matches with what I'm seeking, the problem I'm trying to solve, the service I want to receive, whatever that is for that business owner. Those special, like those kinds of special short-term projects. I also do a lot of lead magnets, automations, nurturing email sequences. And then one thing that I've added within the last couple of years is book editing and ghostwriting services. So that's been kind of a passion project for myself. I have a couple of published books out there myself, and once again, like that service found me. One of my regular clients came to me one day and was like, Leah, I want to write a book. Can you help me? I was like, yes, absolutely. Let's do it. And so we just like her book just came out. It's about hypnotherapy. It's a book called You Are Not Broken, and it's just beautiful. And like, so finding those projects and then deepening that work and being able to see, like, oh, yeah, this folds in so seamlessly to what I already do, it becomes a really marketable and logical part of some service providers' offer suite.
Mhm.
Books are really a low risk way to get to know a service provider and what they do and how they help people so that you can begin the know, like, and trust journey for anywhere from $10 to $20, of consuming this person's expertise in such a way that that might be enough for you, to read that book and get what you need for it, or it might be an invitation for you to work more deeply with that individual. And so I really have enjoyed being part, just finding new ways to solidify the relationship between a service provider or a helping professional and the ideal clients that it's in their heart and soul to help.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's in all of that. I think how when I hear you say all those things, like especially on like if we're talking business providers side of things, it's like all just having a cohesive brand that like says the same things that they're trying to convey to their clients. And I can't tell
Hmm.
you how many times and I see it from the social media side of things where I'm like, it's not the same as copywriting, but in a sense, it's like you say, or your copy says this, but when I go here, that's not what I read. And it's different and it's changing and the industries are shifting. I guess I'm curious to ask, and I guess I don't know what your answer will be on this, but when it comes to like copywriting with the emergence of like ChatGPT and AI engines and stuff like that,
Hmm.
do you leverage that as a tool in some capacities, or is it an arch nemesis to copywriters?
Okay, so here's my journey. Oh my gosh, and I've done kind of a like a 180 with it. So at first when AI came out, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be out of a job." Like, what do we do? Panic. And now I've actually turned toward AI just to get to know it. Like, okay, what am I up against here? That was kind of my attitude at first. And in recent months, I've actually started to leverage it. And this is what I do. So typically what will happen is I will write one draft of an email for a client, and that will come from inside me and from the strategy session that I've had with my client about what they want to talk about that month, or what special offers or pricing or new programming that is coming up on their horizon. So that all occurs in a meeting between me and the client. And then I will write a draft. And sometimes a second draft for the week will come straight out of that and it will just flow through me. And that's great. And I don't really feel a need to use ChatGPT or Gemini or, any of the other myriad options that are popping up out there. And then other times I will use that first draft to create a second draft in AI. So then I will copy and paste that first draft that I wrote into Gemini, for example, and say, hey, I need a post that's similar to this. And usually what Gemini will spit out is something that is not quite aligned with the brand voice of the client. And so then what I find I will have to do, which is great, is go into that second draft that was AI generated and make a bunch of edits, change the voice and tweak it so that it actually sounds like the studio that I represent, that I write for. And so I usually find that I end up keeping probably about maybe 30 to 50% of the AI generated content. And then the rest is edits that I make, or changing the order of something, or putting in a few key phrases that are really specific to that studio, or just generally using my brand knowledge of that client to be like, okay, this is how the voice needs to match up. And so what I like using Gemini for is inspiration, but it's not sophisticated enough yet, at least for me, to where I can be like, okay, just generate this draft and it's going to come out as a match,
Hmm.
pardon me, for that client. So that's kind of like the challenge and the opportunity that I see with ChatGPT. When I'm involved in my book editing and my ghostwriting, I don't find AI to be helpful at all. In fact, I recently was hired to completely rewrite a book for a client that they received what I believe to be an AI draft, which was
Mm,
not at all authentic to this author's voice. And so while the AI may have been helpful in creating like an outline structure for the book, the actual guts of the book, at least in this instance and for the authors that I work with, needs to be written by a human,
mm,
partly because it's so heavy in the personal experience of that author. So a lot of the material that I either ghostwrite or edit is part memoir and then part self-help instructional based on whatever their expertise level is. And so and I haven't, even though I haven't used AI in the book generation aspect of what I do, about the only thing that I could see that being helpful for would be like maybe generating an outline just to provide some structure or organization. But so far in any of my book projects, I have not used AI even for that structural feature.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think I thought the same thing too as the emergence of AI, and I'm like, oh, all these jobs are going to be gone. It's like, well, maybe in the way that we once knew them, but like you said, if you're able to leverage AI in the way that you use it, I mean, it still requires a lot of inputs, a lot of tweaks, a lot of honing in the brand voice. I know,
Hmm.
I use some for script writing, and I'm still figuring out, hey, how do I want to convey my videos about my business, what I do. Some of them, like, I watched the video from a script that I had made. I'm like, that's not me, right? So like
Hmm.
you can lose that personal touch too if you're not putting in enough like natural human inputs, and you're like, hey, tell me how I should do this. So that's where I think it is cool that you're able to leverage it, because I would imagine there probably are, unfortunately, some copywriters who now are getting into copywriting who are only using AI.
Hmm.
And I think, I don't know, you can lose a lot there if you're not refining it to their brand and truly trying to understand them
Yeah,
from the other business.
exactly. One thing that I notice, that from the requests that I've made of Gemini, like, hey, help me with this email or whatever, is that often what comes out is very generic, even if I'm super specific in my prompts. What AI gives me back often feels like too markety
Mm-hmm.
or a little bit old school in some of the formulas that are spit back out,
Mm-hmm.
where it's too, like, it feels too salesy. And
Yeah.
yeah, and my approach generally that I like to take with the writing that I do for clients is informational, educational. There's usually a soft call to action unless we're promoting like a specific, like a sale or a special or a challenge or something within that person's studio that has a deadline to it, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, sign up now or you'll miss your chance. Like, that's about the only time that I really get super strident with my calls to action. Otherwise, it's like a request for sharing stories or, engage with this email or this social post somehow,
Mm-hmm.
or go to this link and receive a freebie download, where I'm generally inviting people to take advantage of a lead magnet or something like that. And any time that I've gotten something back from AI, I usually have to downplay significantly sort of the more salesy speak that
Mm-hmm.
AI will spit out. So that is one major limitation that I've noticed in my experience with it so far.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm seeing the exact same thing on the social media side of things too, where it's like it can be leveraged, but then you have on the very other end content that has been made. The script was written with AI, the voice is AI, the video is AI, and it's just cold and not human, and it's weird.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you can
I
tell.
think, and you can really still tell. Luckily, I'm hoping it's a little while until you can't tell, but no, that's really good. I try to ask every time I'm speaking with a business owner on here, as you know, I'm a young entrepreneur myself. I ran a window cleaning business for 4 years and then pivoting to this marketing agency. I guess maybe twofold, but maybe specifically what you would say to a young entrepreneur to pursue and to keep going and push forward over those through those valleys and stuff like you
Hmm.
were saying. And then I would love for you to get into some of the challenges. It could be broadly through your entrepreneurship journey or specifically with what you're doing now.
Okay, so what would I suggest
I
for,
threw
like,
out a
by way of
lot.
advice for
Let's
new
start with like, yeah,
entrepreneurs?
what would you say to a young entrepreneur who,
Yeah,
you know,
persistence. Like, once you kind of have decided, like, this is the path I want to take, these are the gifts that I want to put out there, it's a slow cooker crock pot scenario. It is not a microwave. People have to trust you before they will go all in with you or go all in with a high ticket or whatever. And so the more consistent you can be with your content production, whether that's email, social media, video, YouTube, whatever, doesn't have to be every day, but consistency. So like maybe embracing like a twice per week model of putting yourself out there and stick with it. Like, continue to refine your offers, continue to refine your audience. I think that certainly the thing that I've learned both in the studio ownership and with this content business is that I'm continually like dialing in who it is that I most love to work with. So it's not for me. For example, at first it was like studio owners, Pilates studio owners, yoga studio owners, like, I'll just, anybody is great who owns a studio, because that's my, like, that's where I excel. It's what I know a lot about. I know a lot about movement. I can speak in that technical language as well as translate it to a consumer, dialogue. for studio owner. Like there's a lot of things I can do with that. But what I learned in the first couple of years is like, no, it's actually a very particular kind of studio owner that I
Mm,
want to work with. It's a person who
mm,
sees the value of delegating out certain skills that they don't have time or expertise with. It's a it's a studio owner who is willing to make time for the strategy session that we are going to have together so that I can write well for them. So they've already thought out or are willing to think out like this is what I want to do this month, this quarter, this year in my studio. And that I become the voice and the amplification for that. And so just like having that collaborative feel, there's certain personality types that I click well with and others that maybe not so much. And so being
mhm,
able to like really say, at least in my own head, like here's the person that I want to call in. Here's the next customer that I want to call in or the next project that I want to call in. So having that be clear and you do not skip over the experimental phase of your business. So the whole first like 1 to 3 years is just going to be this massive experiment where you're providing some services, you're getting paid, hopefully, you know, hopefully you're getting paid a little bit, but each time that you complete a project or work with somebody or whatever, it's like it's all data for, okay, how do I want to do it next time? Or what do I want my next iteration to be? And so I don't think there's any fast tracking that. And I don't think it's beneficial to try to like breeze by it or blow it off. Like, so really being able to sit in your first 1 to 2 years of, hey, this is going to be an experiment. I know I have some goals, but I'm really just going to put my stuff out there and see who cheers, see who goes
mm.
for it. And then I'm going to refine what I do based on those responses in the first couple of years of my business. So there's your first
No, that's
response.
great. That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I would say also like my generation probably more. I mean, we live in an instant gratification
Hmm.
type society, right? I mean, I can order something, it could be on my doorstep this evening.
True.
But I think there are a lot of people who I see take that perspective on business too, and that is just
Then
not
work.
where you're gonna find you might be able to succeed in a short term, but there's
Hmm.
gonna be no longevity in that, and you're gonna let a lot of customers down. You're gonna ruin a lot of relationships. So yeah, no, that's really great advice. And you did hit on a bit of like what some of your struggles and just pivoting with the clients that you want to work with. I think that is
Hmm.
critical, and I've been seeing that too with some people or some clients I've been meeting with where they're like, I've been running this ad for this long, and these people I get in my door, I just don't like working with them. They never want to buy anything. I'm like, well, okay, your ad is $50 on an initial $150 consultation, but you're trying to sell them a $1,500 service plan. Doesn't add up. So
That's
I
not
mean, and
working.
that's where I feel like your profession truly comes in and really shines, is like you meet with them in the way of like helping them find their target clients in the same way that you talk about how you found
Yeah.
it? Or okay.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And typically most of my business at this point and really forever, and I can't like this feels like a fluke. So I'm very sporadic in my self-promotion. I was kind of doing that a lot at first, and a lot of my business comes to me through referral. And I have now kind of built up this small client family of people who kind of need special projects here and there on a rolling basis. So I have some regular like month to month clients where they're on a subscription with me and I just am responsible for keeping their marketing, going at their studio. And that feels great. And it's sustaining, right? So that was a key element to helping my business feel sustainable was setting up a subscription service where it's like I will do this for you every month. And the reason why is because you the studio owner do not have time to do it. You're doing too many other things to really make your marketing actually do what it's supposed to do, which is bring new people into the door. So I spend a lot of time with my clients on who their ideal clients are and who we want to attract, and then that helps me write to that person. And then yeah, and so just having that subscription has been really sustainable. And now I'm at a point where I know enough people and have enough contacts that people will often seek me out if they have if they want to write a book now. That's kind of the new thing. And so I feel very grateful for that. But at the same time, I have planted a lot of seeds. And when I do post, it's with a very consistent message. I do a lot of social proofs on social media where I'm saying, like, such and so client just did this, as a result of my services. And so yeah. So it's a sporadic message, but it's also like by way of like I don't typically post every week or 2 times a week. However, when I do post, it is a very consistent message and I'm dialing into like this is what I'm doing now and this is why it works.
Yeah.
Does
No,
that does that answer
that's
your
really good.
question?
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's really good. I mean, and that's like social media strategy for different businesses is different, and the way that they get leads is different. But I think at
Hmm.
the bare minimum, it needs to be consistent with their branding, which I think you're hitting spot on. I mean, I see a lot of industries where they just carbon copy the next business over because it's what they see them
Hmm.
doing, but the person they're copying is not doing it well. So, and it
Yeah.
doesn't speak to their brand. It's I don't know, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but
Well, I wanted to actually jump in and kind of circle back around because you were talking about, people who run Facebook ads and they're like, oh, the leads I'm getting are just not quality leads. And
mhm,
oftentimes, I think that's because we're not doing a good job of clearly defining who it is we want to work with. So I'll give you an example. I actually just saw a television commercial the other day, which those still work, P.S.,
mhm,
where it was a financial advising company and they were talking about like planning your planning out your retirement assets so that you can basically retire comfortably and not have to pay as many taxes. And at the very end of the commercial, in the call to action, they said, right now we are offering like a free consultation for anybody with a net worth of 500K or above. So they qualified their audience right there in just that one statement. Don't call us unless you have at least $500,000 in your portfolio. So that would be the one tip that, for your listeners, especially if they're trying to get a handle on how do I market better or how do I get more qualified leads, be really consistent about here's my baseline. I need to have somebody who can actually afford my services.
mhm.
And you can afford my services if your company is making 100 to 200K a year in revenue, like brass tacks, And there's a million different ways to qualify an audience. You might say, I don't know, it might be something like as simple as if you're suffering from depression, we want to talk to you. You know, where that rules out anxiety, bipolar, any number of things. Like they've really said, we want to work with people who have clinical depression. That's just one example. And I'm in a helping, I touch a lot of helping industries. So I'm always thinking about psychotherapy and gyms,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But it could be like, we want to work with you if you have at least 6 people on your team, for whatever service. Or, yeah, or it could be a location descriptor. Like we service people in the Wilmer, Minnesota area. So there's a million different ways to qualify your leads to make it specific enough where the people who respond are actually have more of a shot at being the type of person you want to work with. So that's one
Yeah.
thing that I really encourage people doing as they're working through their marketing, especially in the first year or two. Every time you get a hit of like, "Ooh, I want to work with such and so, or I want to work with this specific kind of person," then you pivot your marketing to to narrow that down, to funnel it in.
You need to tell them. You need to tell them you are who I want to work with. I mean, I feel like so many businesses and myself included when I was doing the window cleaning, you almost are like, I don't want to the wording is scary because you're like
Hmm.
I'm gonna cut out all these different people who I'm not gonna be able to work with now.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't know who said it. I'm sure a million people have said it, but it's like if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. Like
correct.
I mean, everyone hears it and they're like, "Oh, cool. Like, who is that
Yeah,
for? Wasn't for me,
right.
you know." And yeah, I mean, and that's. I feel like your whole job is like the power of words, like with your
Hmm.
writing, with your and that all is brand on the branding side, in the writing it's their personal brand that you're trying to make sure is cohesive, and
Yeah.
that's very
Hmm.
cool.
Thank
I would
you.
love for you, yeah, I would love for you to just maybe go how someone would work with you, like maybe you give who you want to work with, and
Sure.
then just what that process looks like and where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that I'm really calling in right now is actually hoping to attract one more kind of regular monthly either studio client or travel agent or somebody who relies on that regular nurturing client or nurturing content
Hmm.
to pull in their next client. And so, of course, my background is in a lot of helping industries. I have a lot of knowledge of the psychotherapy industry. I have a lot of knowledge of the movement and Pilates and yoga and physical fitness industries, and specifically with owners who have independent or boutique studios. So I'm not a good fit for like a franchise owner because usually those types of owners will have some restrictions or whatever on who they can hire for their marketing or what kind of material they can put out. So that's just typically franchisees are not a good fit for me, but independent owners of boutique studios or clinics are a great fit for me. So that's one, and I've got one spot available for that particular individual right now. And and the advantage is once again, it's that person who like if they had 100 hours every day, they could knock out their content. They can
Mm.
write. They're articulate. They're, like they can do all the things. They just don't have the time um, to be able to dedicate to it on a regular basis. And so that's the person that I help the most. And then the other type of project that I'm calling in right now is one more book project. And so that's either a ghostwriting or an editing project for, again, similar type of individual, that subject matter expert in one of those related industries that has something of value that they want to put out in their industry because they see a problem or they see a gap, but they don't know how to get all that stuff down in an organized way. They want to have a tool that they can bring with them to speaking gigs, speaking engagements that they can put out and publish in the world as a part of their marketing funnel, kind of like a step up from a lead magnet, where they're talking a little bit about self-help and self-improvement, and they also want to get their own story out there. So it's part memoir, part self-improvement, instructional subject matter expertise. Those are my best. It's such a joy to work with those two types of individuals.
Great. Sounds good.
Yeah,
I'll make sure I get the best contact info from you, and I'll make sure that I put a link there
perfect.
before I share
Yeah,
it.
and
But
I'm
yes,
so excited to promote your podcast. I will do that on all my channels. If you'll give me the name and like where people can find it, then
of
I'll post
course.
those links out.
Yeah, thank you so much for
My
coming on and for
pleasure.
talking.
My pleasure. Thank you